My dear beloved, there is something they have not admitted to anyone yet. Not to friends, not to family, not even fully to themselves. But lately, every path they try taking emotionally somehow circles back to you again. It is becoming impossible for them to escape the truth. Now your energy has moved beyond memory and settled somewhere permanent inside their emotional world. At first, they thought time would calm everything down. They believed distance would eventually make the feelings quieter, easier to ignore, easier to organize into something manageable. But the opposite happened. The more silence existed between you, the louder your presence became inside them. And now they are beginning to understand why. Because real connection does not disappear simply because two people stop speaking openly for a while. Real connection waits beneath the surface. It survives confusion, it survives fear, it survives moments where both hearts pretend not to care as deeply as they truly do. And lately, their heart has become exhausted from pretending. Stay with me because something emotional is unfolding here that even they did not expect. There was a recent moment where they suddenly stopped in the middle of their ordinary routine because your memory arrived with unusual intensity. Not a dramatic memory, not even a major moment, just something small. The sound of your laughter, the softness in your voice during a quiet conversation, the way your energy always carried calmness even when emotions were difficult to explain. That small memory affected them more deeply than it should have. And in that moment, something inside them finally broke open emotionally. They realized they no longer want a future built around emotional avoidance. They no longer want connections that only look good from the outside while feeling empty underneath, because your presence showed them what emotional sincerity actually feels like. And now everything else feels incomplete compared to that. They are beginning to understand that your love was never demanding, never manipulative, never based on pressure. It was patient, quiet, careful, and somehow that made it even more powerful. The world taught them to expect loud emotions, temporary excitement, unpredictable affection. But your feelings carried something different: stability, emotional honesty, peace. And peace affects people deeply when they spent years surviving emotional chaos. Sometimes late at night, they replay moments where they almost reached out to you but stopped themselves. Moments where pride interrupted honesty. Moments where fear disguised itself as emotional control. Looking back now, those moments haunt them softly because they realize how close they came to losing something meaningful simply because they were afraid to fully feel it. And perhaps the most emotional part of all this is that they can now see your hidden feelings clearly in memories they once misunderstood. The pauses in your voice, the careful restraint in your words, the moments you pulled back emotionally just to protect yourself from disappointment. It all makes sense to them now. And instead of making them feel powerful, that realization humbles them deeply because they understand something important. Now, loving quietly often requires more courage than loving loudly. Anyone can express emotion during certainty, but carrying genuine feelings silently while fearing misunderstanding takes incredible emotional strength. You did that, and they finally see it. They are no longer imagining a future without emotional vulnerability. In fact, vulnerability has started feeling strangely beautiful to them lately. Beautiful because your sincerity showed them that real connection is not built through emotional games. It is built through honesty strong enough to survive fear. There are moments where they suddenly imagine standing in front of you again after all this emotional distance. They think about what your eyes might reveal, now that silence no longer hides the truth completely. They wonder whether the air between you will immediately feel different, softer, warmer, more emotionally open than before. And honestly, those thoughts overwhelm them because deep down they already know this connection changed them permanently. Not temporarily, not emotionally, for one season permanently. Your energy altered the way they understand affection itself. Before you they thought love was mostly intensity. Now they understand love can also feel calm, grounded, safe enough to breathe inside. That realization alone has already changed the way they move through life. Even people around them are noticing subtle differences. They seem more thoughtful lately, more emotionally distracted, less interested in shallow attention, because once someone experiences emotional depth, superficial connection becomes difficult to tolerate for very long, and you became the emotional depth they cannot replace. Listen carefully because this next truth matters deeply. They are starting to feel emotionally protective over the possibility of you now. Not possessive, protective of the connection, protective of your heart, protective of the fragile honesty that finally surfaced between both of you. That feeling surprises them because it arrived naturally without force. And now they are realizing something that changes everything. They do not simply miss your presence. They miss who they become emotionally around you. Softer, more honest, more alive. That is why distance no longer comforts them the way it once did. Distance now feels heavy, unnatural, almost painful in ways they struggle explaining logically. And somewhere tonight, while silence wraps around their thoughts once again, they are finally admitting something they avoided for far too long. They are no longer trying to protect themselves from loving you. They are trying to figure out how to finally stop hiding it. And the closer they move toward that truth emotionally, the faster their old fears begin losing power over them. Because deep inside, they know something now that cannot be undone. Your heart reached theirs long before words ever fully caught up. And ever since that realization settled inside them, nothing about their emotional world has felt the same again. There is something changing inside them now that even they can no longer deny. The emotional distance they once depended on for safety is beginning to feel unbearable instead of comforting. And the strange part is this shift did not happen because someone forced them to confront their feelings. It happened quietly, naturally through realization after realization, slowly breaking down the walls they spent so long building around their heart. Lately, they have been catching themselves doing things they never used to do before. Reading old conversations again, pausing when your name appears unexpectedly, smiling at memories they once tried to suppress. And every single time it happens, the same thought rises inside them with growing intensity, wondering why everything still leads back to you. That question follows them everywhere. Now, during quiet mornings, during crowded moments surrounded by people, even during times when they try distracting themselves with work, routines, responsibilities, anything capable of silencing what they feel, but nothing works the way it used to anymore because your presence has already rooted itself too deeply inside their emotional world. There was a recent moment where they almost reached out to you impulsively, not because they were lonely, not because they needed temporary comfort, but because suddenly the idea of remaining emotionally distant from you felt wrong to them, completely wrong. They stared at their phone longer than usual. Their thoughts moved in circles. One part of them wanted to speak honestly, immediately. Another part feared moving too quickly after everything that happened emotionally between you both before. But even though they stopped themselves that night, something important still changed. For the first time, they realize their silence is no longer protecting them. It is hurting them, and that realization is becoming impossible for them to ignore. Now they are beginning to understand that your connection was never based on convenience. Convenience disappears easily. What exists between you survived confusion, fear, emotional distance, and unfinished conversations. That kind of bond leaves marks on the soul. They see that clearly now. There are moments lately where they suddenly become emotional over the smallest reminders of you. A song, a phrase, a certain time of night. Even silence itself sometimes feels filled with your energy, and what unsettles the most is how natural it feels. Your presence no longer feels separate from their emotional reality. It feels woven into it completely. And honestly, they are tired of pretending otherwise. Sometimes they sit alone, imagining how different everything could have been if honesty had arrived sooner between you both. They wonder how many misunderstandings grew simply because both hearts were trying too hard to protect themselves from vulnerability. And that thought creates a quiet sadness inside them because deep down they know this connection deserved openness long before now. But there is another truth slowly becoming clear to them as well. Perhaps everything unfolded this way because both of you needed time to emotionally grow into the connection instead of rushing into it before you were ready. That realization softened something inside them recently. Instead of feeling regret alone, they started feeling gratitude too. Gratitude that despite all the confusion, despite all the emotional delays, the connection somehow remained alive underneath everything. And that changes the way they see your future together. Now, their feelings no longer feel abstract. They feel real enough to build a future around, real enough to change plans for, real enough to fight fear for. And fear is exactly what they are confronting right now. Not fear of loving you, fear of losing the opportunity to finally love you honestly. That fear wakes them up at night sometimes because now they understand something painful. Genuine emotional connection is rare, extremely rare. Most people spend years surrounded by temporary attention while secretly longing for one person capable of understanding them deeply. You became that person for them. That realization carries enormous emotional weight. Now, there are moments where they suddenly imagine seeing you again after all this emotional growth finally settles between you both. They imagine conversations without guardedness, eye contact without hidden feelings underneath it. They imagine what it would feel like to finally stop carrying emotional restraint every time your connection becomes intense. And every time they imagine those moments, their heart moves closer to courage, because courage is growing inside them now, little by little. The courage to stop pretending your connection can remain unfinished forever. The courage to stop acting emotionally unaffected. The courage to admit that your presence changed them far more deeply than they originally intended. And perhaps the most beautiful part of all this is the way they think about you now. It is no longer only about attraction or emotional intensity. It has become something softer, more meaningful, more permanent. They think about peace when they think about you, emotional safety, quiet happiness, the kind of love that feels calm enough to build a real life inside. That is what overwhelms them lately, shifting completely from fantasy into reality. The possibility that someone like you could genuinely exist in their future, emotionally, not temporarily, but permanently. And the more they allow themselves to feel that possibility fully, the less interested they become in running from this connection anymore. Listen carefully, because this next truth matters deeply. They are starting to realize that your love did not weaken them emotionally the way they once feared. It strengthened them. It made them more honest with themselves, more emotionally aware, more willing to confront parts of their heart they ignored for years. That transformation is still happening quietly inside them right now. Even if you cannot fully see it, even if they have not spoken every truth aloud yet, their emotional world is already reorganizing itself around the reality of you. And somewhere tonight, while your name drifts through their thoughts once again, they are finally understanding something undeniable. Some people enter life briefly and disappear like passing seasons, but others arrive carrying a feeling so rare that once the heart recognizes it, nothing afterward ever feels the same again. There is a quiet battle happening inside them now, and nobody around them fully understands it. On the outside, they still try to appear composed. They continue conversations. They move through responsibilities. They smile when expected to smile. But inwardly, everything feels different now, because your connection no longer feels like something they can place in the background of their life. It has moved to the center, and that realization is changing them faster than they expected. Lately, they have been feeling emotional waves at strange moments during the day. Moments where your memory suddenly arrives so strongly that they have to stop whatever they are doing just to breathe through it. Not because the feeling is painful, but because it is real, too real to dismiss anymore. There was a recent night where sleep would not come easily to them. They kept turning over thoughts in their mind, replaying your energy, your voice, your presence. And somewhere between silence and exhaustion, they admitted something to themselves they had avoided for a very long time. They do not want another temporary connection. They do not want shallow conversations that disappear by morning. They do not want affection without emotional depth anymore. What they want is you, not a fantasy version of you, the real you. The one who stayed emotionally sincere even while protecting your heart quietly. The one who carried genuine affection without forcing it onto them. The one whose presence felt calming instead of confusing. And honestly, that realization shook them deeply, because now they understand why nobody else fully reached them emotionally the way you did. They are beginning to notice how different life feels whenever your energy enters their thoughts. Their mood changes instantly. Their heart softens instantly. Even difficult days feel lighter for a moment when they think about the possibility of finally being emotionally honest with you. That kind of emotional impact cannot be ignored forever. And the more they try understanding it logically, the more emotional it becomes instead. Sometimes they wonder whether you realize how deeply you affected their spirit without even trying. You did not demand emotional control over them. You did not pressure them into attachment. In fact, your restraint made everything more powerful, because it allowed them to discover their feelings naturally instead of feeling emotionally cornered. That changed everything for them, because genuine connection feels different from emotional pressure. And your connection always felt genuine. There are moments lately where they imagine your future together so vividly that it almost feels like memory instead of imagination. Small moments, quiet moments, sitting together after long days, sharing silence without awkwardness, looking at each other without fear, interrupting the emotional honesty between you both. Those thoughts stay with them now, and perhaps what affects them most deeply is how peaceful those visions feel. Not chaotic, not dramatic, peaceful. The kind of peace they secretly spent years searching for in the wrong places. They are no longer emotionally satisfied by distraction. Things that once entertained them temporarily now feel empty very quickly. Because once someone experiences emotional depth, superficial attention loses its power. And your connection gave them emotional depth in a way they never expected. Sometimes they feel regret over how long fear controlled their choices. They think about the emotional distance that could have been shortened if honesty had arrived sooner, and because every moment apart forced them to understand the value of what they almost lost. Now that they fully see it, they cannot unsee it anymore. There is also something else happening inside them lately that they have not spoken about openly. They are beginning to feel emotionally protective over your future together. They think carefully before making certain choices now. They question whether certain paths still align with the emotional truth growing inside them. Because your connection no longer feels separate from their future, it feels connected to it completely. And that realization carries enormous emotional weight. They are slowly preparing themselves emotionally for honesty. Real honesty, the kind that changes relationships permanently once spoken aloud. Not rushed honesty, not impulsive emotion, sincere honesty. The kind that comes from finally understanding what the heart truly wants after years of emotional confusion. There are nights where they rehearse conversations with you silently inside their mind. They imagine finally admitting how often your presence stayed with them during difficult moments, how many times they tried convincing themselves to move on emotionally and failed because your energy kept returning stronger each time. And deep down, they know something now that scares them only because it feels so important. If they lose this connection through silence again, it will hurt them far more deeply than they are prepared for. That fear is becoming stronger than their fear of vulnerability now. And once that balance changes inside a person, everything begins changing afterward. Their emotional walls are weakening. Their hesitation is weakening. Even the version of them that once believed emotional distance was safer is beginning to disappear because your love reached places inside them that had been emotionally asleep for far too long. And now those places are waking up all at once. They are no longer wondering whether your connection matters. That question already has an answer inside them. Now the only thing left is timing. Timing for honesty, timing for courage, timing for two hearts to finally stop protecting themselves from the exact love they secretly wanted all along. And before you leave, if you feel this connection growing stronger too, comment the number 2222 below, because sometimes numbers become quiet confirmations that two souls are finally moving toward the same emotional truth. At the same time, something even deeper is happening inside them now, and this time it feels impossible for them to return to the version of themselves that existed before fully recognizing your love. The emotional awakening has moved beyond curiosity, beyond confusion, beyond hesitation. It has become certainty slowly unfolding inside their heart with every passing day, and certainty changes people. Lately, they have started noticing how empty certain parts of their life feel whenever your presence is missing. Emotionally, places that once distracted them now feel quiet in the wrong way. Conversations that once seemed exciting now feel unfinished. Even moments of success feel strangely incomplete because deep down there is someone they wish they could share those moments with. Naturally, that realization arrives softly at first, almost invisibly, but now it follows them everywhere. There was a recent moment where someone around them asked a simple question about the future, and instead of giving their usual answer, their mind immediately drifted toward you, toward the possibility of building something emotionally real, instead of continuing to wander through temporary situations that never fully touch their soul. That moment shook them quietly, because they realized your presence has already become part of the future they imagined privately inside their heart. And perhaps the most emotional part of all this is how naturally it happened. You did not force your way into their emotional world. You became important through sincerity, through emotional consistency, through the quiet way your energy always felt safe instead of manipulative. That kind of connection changes people slowly, then suddenly, all at once. Now they catch themselves wondering what life would actually feel like beside you. Honestly, not fantasy, not idealized perfection. Real life. Peaceful mornings, long conversations after difficult days, small moments filled with emotional safety instead of emotional confusion. And every time they imagine those things, their heart becomes softer toward the idea of love itself. Because before you, love often felt complicated to them, heavy, unstable, difficult to trust completely. But your energy introduced a different possibility, a calmer possibility, a deeper one. Their fear of vulnerability is beginning to lose its control over them slowly but undeniably before they worried about being emotionally exposed, about caring too deeply, about giving someone the power to hurt them. But now another fear has become stronger. The fear of never fully experiencing this connection honestly. And that fear is pushing them toward emotional courage in ways they never expected. There are nights where they sit alone, replaying moments with you over and over, realizing how many signs existed long before either of you fully acknowledged the truth emotionally. The hidden affection in your energy, the careful way you protected your feelings, the emotional restraint both of you carried, while pretending the connection was smaller than it truly was. Looking back now, it feels almost unbelievable to them that something so real remained hidden beneath silence for so long. But perhaps that silence was necessary, because now when they think about you, it no longer feels like emotional fantasy. It feels grounded, mature, ready. And readiness changes everything. Your connection is healing parts of them they never openly spoke about before. The exhausted part of them that grew tired of pretending emotional distance was strength. The lonely part of them that stopped believing emotional peace was possible. The guarded part of them that learned how to survive without truly feeling emotionally safe with another person. Around the thought of you, all those walls begin softening naturally. And honestly, that emotional safety overwhelms them sometimes because people spend years searching for someone capable of making the heart feel calm instead of anxious. Your presence became that calmness for them without even trying to. That is why they cannot stop thinking about you lately. Not because they are emotionally lost, but because they are emotionally finding themselves through this connection. There are moments now where they almost feel pulled toward you internally, like something inside them already knows distance between you cannot continue forever. The closer they move toward emotional honesty, the more impossible silence begins to feel. And somewhere deep inside, they already know something important. Your connection is reaching a turning point, a moment where hidden emotions will no longer remain hidden comfortably, a moment where truth will begin outweighing fear completely. And the closer that moment gets, the more emotionally restless they become, because now they understand something they once refused to admit. Your love was never a burden to them. It was a gift, a rare one, the kind that arrives quietly and changes the emotional direction of an entire life afterward. They are beginning to let go of the old version of themselves that believed emotional distance was safer than emotional honesty. That version is fading now, little by little. In its place, someone softer is emerging, someone more emotionally awake, someone finally ready to stop treating genuine love like something dangerous. And every single realization keeps leading them back to the